Hey, what's going on? Hope you're having a fantastic day. You'll have to excuse me for my sexy rustic voice. I've been sick for like a couple weeks, probably from like not sleeping and like working too much. On the upside though, I no longer sound like a 13-year-old, maybe 15. Still, I am super excited about this video because today we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of this Zhiyun weebill-s and actually conclude if this gimbal is actually the best portable gimbal out in the market. Spoiler alert. It is. There, I said it. That's a big statement, but stick around until the end of the video and I'll explain why. And I'm not just saying that because Zhiyun sent me this gimbal to review. I really have been looking for like a small portable gimbal with the least amount of limitations I can settle with for like next couple years, and this is it. So let's start with what I liked about this gimbal the most before talking about some of the things I did not like. Now, I'm not gonna like mention every single thing I liked about this gimbal since I did make an initial review video on this. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it like right here, but these are the additional things I really liked over time. First is the scalability. This is resuming the topic I covered on my first weebill-s video, but now that I use the heavy Sony 16 to 35mm G Master with this gimbal all day during a wedding video shoot, I have a better appreciation on this topic. I'm the second shooter for Envu films and the lead shooter films on like much tighter focal lengths like 50 or like 85mm, and I usually run with the wider focal lengths like all day. If you want to see an example video of this, like he's got like a teaser film going on, so I'll link it in the description below. 16 to 35mm G Master is not as heavy as like 24 to 70mm G Master, but it is a very front heavy since when you're at like the wider focal length, the front glass element is actually all the way out, especially between 16mm and 20mm. I had to balance this lens at 20mm and the gimbal confidently handled this lens. One thing I noticed though was that when I went underslow mode with the lens after like auto calibrating, the motor did vibrate. Usually this happens when the motor strength is set too high, so I manually reduced the tilt motor power from like 34 down to 28%, and the vibration was gone and it worked like a charm. That's how powerful this motor is, guys. Some of the other portable gimbals run at like 100% motor power on a lens like this. What makes this category perfect for this gimbal is that the space they give you to put the camera setup complements the big motor power. On weebill-s, for the heck of it, I was able to balance the Tamron 28 to 75mm at 75mm without hitting the back motor. Even the 16 to 35mm G Master, I had this much space left after balancing at 20mm. This is freedom, guys, and it's so important, especially for new mirrorless cameras since there's like new lens coming out like every single few months. It's exciting times and I don't want to be like stuck with a certain camera ecosystem because my gimbal limits like what lens I can get. For example, they just announced the Sigma 24 to 70mm f2.8 for Sony E-mount, and I didn't have to wonder if this gimbal was gonna like support it, especially after hearing that it was gonna be like lighter than the 24 to 70 G Master. I mean, like every practical gimbal lens is lighter than the 24 to 70 G Master. Oh, no? Oh yeah, there is the GH5 and Sigma 18 to 35mm f1.8 Canon EF with the speed booster. Yeah, that's a monster setup. So I called up my friend who had that exact setup and tested out. That one you do have to remove the eyepiece, but it balanced it and handled at medium motor power. That was like mind-blowing for me. So since they can handle such a heavy setup, one of the subscribers asked, what about for like small teeny setup like RX 100? Well, good question, I said, since big powerful gimbal usually like freaks out and vibrates when you put on like a very light load. So I tested out with custom low motor settings and I can say this gimbal is scalable and versatile on both heavy setups and light setups. Speaking of light, second thing I love about this gimbal even more now is the size of the weight of this actual gimbal. When I was like filming Wedding with Vu, we usually filmed for like 8 to 10 hours straight. Sometimes we're on locations like the beach or the downtown in a city walking around, and having a light gimbal like this really allows me to film longer and experience is not exhausting. At a practical level, I can put this gimbal setup on top of a monopod easily and create this fake crane shot on the fly. I even did this move during a car shoot with two Nissan GTR since I felt safe doing it. I mean, like, you don't want to drop like a gimbal on top of a $100,000 car because your monopod snapped on in half. Just as a reference, even with 300% more torque power, weebill-s is actually 44 grams lighter than the Weebill Lab, which is like amazing since you would think that with bigger motor and like that much more power, it was just gonna be like heavier. There is another simple yet significant feature added to this weebill-s I love, and that is the customizable trigger, which is the follow mode button, and the function button, which is the go mode button. Now you can't customize it to like whatever mode you like, but it does allow you to choose whether to stay in follow mode or the go mode when you press it once. This is a game changer since you can't really hold down the trigger button when you put the gimbal on like a monopod, or if you want to like hold it out in a certain way. And same goes with the function button, which initiates the sports mode, which puts the gimbal response rate to like on steroid. And like any other mode, you don't have to like connect to your phone app to change it. It's all done from the gimbal's OLED screen, which makes this gimbal a really good run and gun gear. So in order to be run and gun, you naturally need like really long battery life. My initial concern when I heard about that the gimbal had 14-hour rated battery life, I thought that was probably on like the super light end, and turns out even with like the heavy setup, I had 50% battery life left at the end of 10-hour wedding shoot. And for the purpose of this test, I like left this gimbal on even when I wasn't actually using it. Like going to the bathroom, which is super weird, guys. Have you guys ever been to a bathroom with the gimbal? I mean, like, what do? Do you put it on the sink so people can splash water on it, or do you hold it while you go? I mean, like, yeah, it's super weird. Anyways, lastly, there's one more feature I think is just like a game changer, which I'm going to actually save it till end of this video because I gotta show you some cool stuff. But let's talk about these two things I did not like about this gimbal. First is because I'm like a hardcore run and gun shooter, and the second thing is because I know some of you guys are like not gonna like this. One thing that bothered me was actually something I really liked initially. On my first review video, I talked about this camera mounting plate adjustment screw. The new setup has much bigger lever, which is great because you can visually tell when it's not locked, preventing from like your camera accidentally sliding around. But after using it for a while, when you pack this in a bag and you had this adjustment perfectly to your camera's balance, all it took was like a little bit of press from the bag to loosen the screw and just mess up your perfectly balanced setup. But what kind of reviewer would I be if I just told you about the problem without actually trying to find a solution, right? So I messed around with it and adjusted the lever position so that when the adjustment screw is like in closed position, even when it gets pressed, it gets tighter but not looser. I mean, like, I want to be able to like pack this gimbal into a book bag going from one location to another quickly without like undoing the balance setup. That's like a must for run and gun. Second downside really has to do with like Sony users. Usually Zhiyun has really good camera compatibility when it comes to like Sony camera connections. This time, however, yes, the record button on the gimbal works just fine when you connect it via the multi to micro USB cable, but you won't have control over like settings like ISO, shutter speed, and like aperture directly from the gimbal. This next method isn't directly supported by Zhiyun, but you could connect your Sony camera to the USB-C port instead of like the multi-port to get the control of these settings, but that disables like the Sony's IBIS. I don't know about you guys, but I'd rather not lose IBIS. Now, I'm only saying this because some of you guys like really like this feature. I, on the other hand, actually rather control all that settings directly from the camera. My principle here is that you want to get used to your camera controls. If you could change all those settings blindfolded, like on the fly, whether you use a gimbal or just anything else. Also, you know how I like met with my GH5 friend earlier in this video? Yeah, I forgot to bring the USB-C cable to test if the GH5 can actually fully be controlled by this gimbal. The point proven here is that trying to carry around a cable everywhere with your gimbal is just not practical, and if you get too used to it and just forget to bring your cable, it's not a great situation. I know this is a personal preference, but I think it's an important mindset you can kind of like expand upon to film faster. You see, a perfect gear is only perfect as your acceptance and the imperfection, and my acceptance is dependent on what feature makes me like excited and allows me to be creative, and at the end of the day, just getting the shot, and this gimbal does that exactly. weebill-s's powerful motor expands my camera ecosystem. My portable gimbal no longer limits me from getting heavier, high-quality lenses. When it comes to like the actual shoot day, I'm able to run and gun to get the shot because there are just simple things on this gimbal that allows me to like move swiftly, lightly, and for a long time. And lastly, with the image transmission module, just opened up so many doors that previous generation gimbals just could not do. And that's the last thing I really love about this gimbal. I know this module has to be like purchased separately or with like more expensive package, but I found so many good use cases out of that. I'm actually making a whole separate video dedicated to this add-on. To summarize it, you know what? Let me just gonna show you the sneak peek. So until the next video, I'll hang around the comment section for the next couple days, and here it is.